first go around, so you are placed back at the exact same start at life, unaware that it's your second time. Maybe it's already happened as you're listening to me right now. The question is, would that second version of you make the exact same decisions you did the first time? Would you end up, however many years later, literally holding the same lamp, asking for literally the same wish, while the genie patiently waits for 2 more cycles to be over so it can confound you by saying, "You've already had your 3 wishes, go away"? If your answer to this question is no, some decisions would be made differently, then you believe more in free will. If your answer is yes, nothing would change, then you believe everything is predetermined by past actions and that we are more like algorithms that have tricked ourselves into thinking we have more freedom of choice than we actually do. The unsettling thing about the deterministic argument is that with a theoretically and probably supernaturally powerful enough computer, you could calculate the future. Of course, the calculations by the computer would also then be accounted for by your decision algorithm when you read them, but then the computer would also have to account for that too, as well as retroactively factoring in its own creation, and away it goes, repeating to infinity forever. Fun. This all sounds so lofty for a critique on a video game series, but games with decisions to make can provide some potent commentary on the nature of free will and consciousness. We saw it in Soma, a little bit in Prey, Sonic the Hedgehog, of course it goes without saying, and now the Witcher series. This is one of the more interesting parts of the games for me that gets better as you import save files between them, but it's also something that many people dislike about the series, that Geralt is a predetermined character. Ironically though, despite this, the games support the idea of free will. Decisions can only be made within the bounds of what Geralt would consider to be a reasonable reaction in these moments. Of course, there's a difference between book Geralt, amnesia Geralt, and post-amnesia Geralt, but within those confines, all the possibilities make sense. Almost all of the time. There's no extremely evil or extremely righteous options. When Geralt is choosing whether to help the Order, the Scoia'tael, or remain neutral, it really is an internal deliberation that could tip one of those 3 ways, along with whether or not he's happy or regrets his decision later. Over the course of these 3 games, we see a canonical exploration of free will being expressed because the players get to resolve that internal struggle. Of course, that still doesn't prove anything regarding determinism because the players themselves are replacing Geralt's algorithm for decisions with their own, assuming that's the side you view as correct, of course. I can't think of another game that does this with meaningful, impactful decisions. Those that try usually provide far too much variance in the options, that the player character can swing rapidly between 2 opposed extremes. There's of course some commentary to be made there about the dreaded duality of man, but The Witcher's narrower scope on decisions which still end up with greater consequences than in most games is much more interesting to me. That's not to say that the series is pristine about this, as we'll see in Witcher 2, but I think the way this acts as an anchor to every decision makes the changes that result from said choices much more interesting, even if I usually prefer having a blank slate character in RPGs. Geralt verbalizes this process in Chapter 3 as he speaks to Triss. He's concerned about his amnesia and wants her advice about his decisions since he believes that she's his most trustworthy source on the Geralt of yesteryear, and she reinforces this idea that every decision you make is within the bounds of the Geralt sphere because she always understands what you do no matter the side you take, aside from one. So maybe it's not ironic that there's only one impactful consequence in this chapter. Maybe it's intentional, a checkpoint on where Geralt views himself and also where the most important decisions begin. Do you choose Shani or Triss to be your girl? Do you choose Siegfried or Yavin to be your boy? And a handful more. The main quest involves attending a party hosted by Lugardin, which is where you will meet Princess Ada, who is the 4th major female character in a row with red hair that wants to romance Geralt. I guess that's why they called themselves CD Projekt Red. Ada was the Striga from the opening cinematic. This can be a little confusing because in the books the Striga doesn't have a name, and the Striga's mother was named Ada. She was the sister of Foltest, who is the king of Temeria, and so this Striga is a product of incest, but that's not why she became a monster. There was a separate curse placed on them by a jealous noble who loved Mother Ada and didn't fully understand what the results of said curse would be. That noble is the man Geralt uses as bait in the cinematic before he breaks the curse, and the surviving girl is presumably then named Ada in honor of her departed mother sometime later, which is super weird considering the king was in love with her, but it's a different time. This Ada wants to have sex with Geralt because of course she does. Who doesn't? It's one of the other sexual encounters that skirts dangerously close to rape to me, but you can turn her down, risking the anger of the princess and an execution by doing so.
I should not have exhausted. I should have splashed.
Before this, you have to entertain her and have Triss conjure her some raw meat. She has unusual appetites, and that's one of the lingering effects of the curse that Geralt warned could return. This is the first of 2 romance cards linked to Ada. You can only get the second one if you don't give her the raw meat and avoid the sex decision altogether. If you do go along with her demands, you get some ominous imagery when Geralt's wolf medallion starts to vibrate, which is a sign he's in danger after Ada knocks it across the room. It's foreplay and foreshadowing at the same time, and it's good that Ada doesn't see it vibrating because she probably wouldn't want to use it with Geralt. King Foltest is currently away from the city, and it's in this party scene that you properly learn about the chaos that's causing. Taller is here and has one of the best conversations in the game. He maintains the charade of being less than a spy by speaking through a noble knight proxy that has taken a vow of silence. If you're carrying enough of the right type of alcohol, you can break through his vow and show Taller up. Regardless, later on he will switch character, and the voice he uses in such a smooth way that he immediately became one of my favorite people in the series. So you understand that it hurt to kill him right after this on my third playthrough. Someone is issuing fake royal edicts while the king is away. Spoilers, it's Ada who is being used by a Knight of the Order named Duet, who is also a Nilfgaardian. Confused yet? Hopefully not. For the sake of clarity, think Empire from Star Wars whenever you hear Nilfgaard, although if you read the books, it's more morally grey than that. They're an expanding empire from south of where the Witcher stories take place. Think of it as like Rome taking over the rest of Europe. They've already been fended off from conquering the Northern Realms twice before now, that's what the intro speech was referencing, but they were defeated just barely. Killing Taller is a choice that I think most players are going to refuse. Duet is the one pushing you to do it, and his villainy is so blunt that you can tell he's one of the bad news bearers. Despite that, I killed Taller on my Order playthrough because I wanted to see what would happen. If he lives, then you get a message from him in Witcher 2, and he also shows up again in Witcher 3 for one of the most important quests in that game. I wanted to see how those moments would change if Geralt killed him in Witcher 1, so stay tuned if you want to find out if you're also curious. One of you watching just audibly let out an "oh no" in response to this, I know it. Surprisingly, this choice changes very little in this game. Duet doesn't trust you any more than before, and even if saved, Taller will go into hiding and won't return in later chapters. This feels like content CD Projekt ran out of time to include, and it's not the only one. We'll get to that. The choice between the Scoia'tael and the Order matters much more. They each have their own separate side quests in Chapter 3. The Scoia'tael want you to clear a powerful monster from elven ruins beneath the city. Every major human city in this world is built on the ruins of an elven one like this, because again this planet belonged to the elves before the humans got here. Doing this for them awakens a teleporter that acts as a secret entrance for the Scoia'tael to enter the city. Meanwhile, the Order quest wants you to investigate what's killing people in the cemetery. Initially it appears to be a ghoul, but then you meet the monster and it can talk. Turns out this special ghoul is sentient and doesn't kill people. It's feasting on the victims of a Scoia'tael group that operate in the area. Nearby you can find them back at it again at Krispy Kreme, murdering people right now, and are given a choice. Either kill the murderous terrorists but not have enough time to save the group of humans that have been trapped by them in the nearby crypt, or let the Scoia'tael go and save the people inside instead. This is ignoring the choice you have when you speak to the ghoul. Do you believe it or choose to kill it? If you choose violence, then the decision causes one of those dimensional ripples and the Scoia'tael vanish from the cemetery, and the crypt situation doesn't happen for no reason that's tied to this decision. Regardless, you can report back to Siegfried and finish this quest in 3 ways. He's most happy if you let the Scoia'tael go and instead save the people they trapped in the crypt. Siegfried marches off in search of the terrorists, and sometimes this triggers main quest progression.
How did that miss?
See, these aren't really side quests, even though they're optional, because this game is a beautiful bastard mess that seems to actively resist attempts at people analyzing it by being so goddamn complicated. The Scoia'tael are planning a bank robbery. In Chapter 2, Vivaldi turns down Yavin when you deliver that note, but Yavin reads between the lines and understands Vivaldi has lost control of his bank, which is how you cleared him of working with Salamandra earlier. So the Scoia'tael use this portal under the city as a staging ground to climb through the sewers into the bank to rob it to fund their war against humans. The Order are called in to handle the situation after Yavin and his people take hostages in the bank during the botched robbery. The conflict you've been seeing throughout the game so far is built to this and will explode even more a little later. At some point in Chapter 3, if you do enough quests and the party scene with Luvarden, time will pass and the heist begins. The Scoia'tael want the Witcher's help clearing those ruins in the sewers, but they don't need it. If you don't offer your services soon enough, they presumably just go for it and lose more people fighting this monster in the process. And the Scoia'tael you can meet in the cemetery on the Order quest are also a part of this unit. Geralt is called in and you can either try to negotiate alone or enter with Siegfried. This is the only time in the game that you are forced to pick a side, even if it is begrudgingly. There are innocent people held hostage. The Order is trying to restore the status quo. The Scoia'tael want to fight against the tyranny that is the human ruling class. So pick a side. No matter who you go with, you will fight your way through those same ruins in the sewers, either in defense of the Scoia'tael or against them. This is yet another minor way that the game changes things in reaction to your decisions, even though what you decided shouldn't make these changes. The presence of these enemies has nothing to do with what you've done with Yavin in the bank, but it happens anyway. The results of these decisions are seen at the end of Chapter 3 and 4. Here it determines which group will work with you to attack the salamander base that you discover with Luvarden. In Chapter 4, it's
Kinda
about who
screwed me out
won't
of a
work
W
with
sack
you.
there by
The side
scaring
you
her
go
off.
against here is permanently pissed off and won't work with you for the rest of the game. Before we can get to that jolly cooperation, two other things need to be resolved in Vizima. The first is about a werewolf.
How did it
Triss can't
happen?
teleport Geralt and his chosen husbando Yavin or Siegfried without a clear source of Salamandra's base. Geralt finds this sneaking through the sewers with some of Luvarden's men in the city guard. This attack is when you see Salamandra asking Radovid for aid, and when a werewolf interrupts your assault. This is another example of side content not really being side content, but in a bad way. If you don't speak to Carmen in the swamp in Chapter 3, then this werewolf just comes out of nowhere and you'll likely be left looking at it like, what the hell, why is there suddenly a werewolf, huh? Of course, there's also another clue in Chapter 2 if you speak to Vincent enough.
Full moon soon. I got paperwork to do. It'll take a while.
Why does she get so many
Good luck
dashes?
solving that mystery. Like, just imagine being Vincent and saying that to a famous witcher and hoping he doesn't crack the code. Helping Carmen with this curse is a multi-stage questline. There's a lot of misinformation about curing lycanthropy, and Geralt hasn't recovered enough of his memories to know what is and isn't bullshit. You try to make a potion with the Tears of a Virgin, which rewards remembering that Siegfried has taken a vow of celibacy when he joined the Order. You gather fool's parsley leaves for Carmen to weave a shirt that, if worn, supposedly prevents the werewolf transformation, and after all that fails, you convince her to lay out her true feelings to totally not Vincent, since the power of true love can work miracles. Said miracles can't happen before this fight though. You have three options here. You can be a by-the-book Witcher and kill Vincent since he is a monster, or you can be a by-the-game's main theme Witcher and decide that intent and actions make a monster, not appearances. The third option, if you've progressed Carmen's questline enough but not to its conclusion, is to try to work a bit of Witcher love to see if it succeeds more than true love.
I can help you break the werewolf spell.
Very well.
This comes across as a fun Easter egg though, since you need to drink a full moon potion ahead of time to get this scene, and there's no indicator whatsoever for that doing anything other than the name linking it to
takes
the
so long
werewolf.
to come
The
out, she
game
just
also never
leaves.
acknowledges this happening afterward. Weird, but I think it's cool that the shirt made of leaves is on the card though. After this, you can track down Radovid, and I want to use this conversation with him to contrast another with an unnamed butcher
has
you
so many
unceremoniously meet in the streets
fuck?
nearby. Both of these men have multiple conversation paths. They speak about the state of the world, politics, magic, major nobles in the city, and both of them even talk about something called the Lodge of Sorceresses, of which Triss is a member. I like Radovid as a character in this game, but the conversation with the butcher is the more interesting one to me. These two characters are very close to each other in the city, and I find the juxtaposition of them so telling about the priorities CD Projekt had when building this game. Care went into the low-level details of this world. You get a perspective from a king, you get a perspective about the same topics from a butcher,
They
and
can
second-hand
maybe dive
information
me,
from
but
his
with
wife
both
through
of them,
him.
I think it'll be even
Any
trade.
character in this world is going to have opinions about the state of it, even misinformed ones, and the delivery of those opinions change depending on the source. Then there are little details like the blacksmith in the marketplace nearby
Says
needing a
forward and then
gemstone
goes
for a
backward.
sword he's making for Duet. This could have easily just been, I need a gemstone for something, go get one for me, but instead it's a small, neat way to
let's
tie
go
this
mid
back
so I
into
can
the
stay
story
here and
around
farm.
you. The game is full of things like this that
Never
enrich
mind.
its world, and you are better rewarded for engaging with its characters because of it. After all of this, you may rightfully wonder why Alvin is so important to the main quest that you can't finish this chapter without finding him. He's just a kid, so how is he on the same level as Super Werewolf and Kings? Surprisingly, the game has prepared for players doing this section last and justifies it through Triss.
Oh,
She
he
has to
didn't
use
go
a spell
mid.
to teleport you and Siegfried/Yavin into the Salamander base,
Sneaky
and
chemo.
before you investigate, Alvin's presence is a major magical question mark. Remember, they don't know it's Alvin yet, and Triss is just detecting a large source of magic that could disrupt her spellcraft, and so you need to track down the source. Which turns out to be a source, Alvin, a child with incredible powers that are out of his control. He has the exact same abilities that we'll see Ciri use in Witcher 3, although it's not clear if he's as strong as she is. Like Alvin, Ciri is also
Why
called a
does he push
source.
so hard?
Shani has decided to take care of the boy, but she's not doing a good job because he's already been kidnapped by Salamandra. It's never stated why exactly Salamandra
She
wants
could
the
always
kid
use
so
some
bad.
extra
My guess
kills,
is that
so
this kidnapping
it's
has
nice
nothing
that
specifically to
somebody
do
did.
with his
Also, I
powers,
just walked
and it's just
super
another
far.
child they were going to use for Witcher mutation experiments, and through that they learn he's important to Geralt and try to get him again as leverage. Either way, you save him with a smidgen of help from Dandelion and then have a choice, Shani or Triss. This is both choosing who is the best guardian for Alvin and who you want to pursue in a more serious relationship. The problem here is that you can turn down their advances and even ignore them, but both of these women still think you're dating them.
Covering this
Like
guy's
being
lane
back in high
'cause he
school,
keeps
right,
dying.
fellas? This is most awkward with Shawnee since she casually asks you for a romantic mid-relationship tier kiss earlier in chapter 3, and if you've avoided her for the most part until now, you may start flapping your arms at your monitor making confused crazy noises as it happens, or maybe that's just me. So you're torn between two sorceresses. Who will you choose? Yep, that's right. Two sorceresses are vying for your attention. Triss the sorceress and Shawnee the sorceress. There are two sorceresses. Did any of you pause the video and write out a comment correcting me yet? I've noticed this is a thing that Witcher 1 fans love to go wild about.
Shawnee isn't a sorceress. She's just a medic. What the hell? She doesn't use magic. Pay attention. Did you even play the game? Did he even play the game? He doesn't know. He doesn't know. He didn't play this game. He doesn't know.
The other is saying that Geralt's swords are silver for monsters, steel for humans. This is apparently unforgivably wrong.
Both are for monsters.
Even though post-amnesia Geralt says it himself in Witcher 3.
One's for monsters, the other for humans.
Are you gonna correct him too? As for Shawnee, I don't think this is fair. You are correct, of course, Shawnee is not a sorceress. She is just a medic, but she does use magic to heal you because Witcher 1 is a celebration of a holiday Todd Howard likes to call Happy Janksgiving. A holiday that moves to a new day whenever Bethesda releases a new game. There's your found a way to criticize Bethesda even though the video has nothing to do with them bingo space for this video. This magic she uses is probably just the game's way of responding to a healing aura buff that both Triss and Shawnee give off. You can see the same effect here from both women, and so I think it's more than forgivable that some players might think Shawnee can use magic. It's not made crystal clear that healing in this world is also done the mundane way when magic is so common. It is made clear in the books and in Witcher 3 though. This choice is a significant, impactful decision that has several consequences. I mostly prefer Shawnee as a person to Triss, but I think Triss is the better choice as a guardian since Alvin needs an education for his magical capabilities, but rejecting either of these women makes them become stunningly petty and vile, especially Shawnee, doubly so considering how level-headed she is in Witcher 3. It's so stark a change it's out of character. Triss is not without her own vindictive streak and out-of-character moments. If you give her Alvin, then she won't proceed with the teleport spell to assault the Salamandra base until you've ended it with Shawnee, even though you may not even be in a relationship with either of these women, and Geralt becomes too much of a whipped man trope to speak up for himself, which is also quite out of character. Again though, this is a symptom of the disease the game has in assuming you did all the side content that ties back into the main story when you might have skipped it. Ending it with Shawnee has nothing to do with the teleport, and yet Triss still makes you do it because she has the leverage to do so, and is role-playing as Yennefer in this game. Whoops, did I just say that? Please ignore, let's move on.
Go.
In a related bout of awkwardness, Geralt goes out with Dandelion and Zoltan here to get trashed. This can possibly be the second time you ever speak to Dandelion, and the first time you ever speak to Zoltan, but let's not repeat the whole point. This scene is important to the book discussion we'll have later, so I want to point it out so you can make a mental note of it. Afterwards, you go home drunk off your ass to either Triss or Shawnee, depending on who you chose. You can pursue your choice for a second romance card if you prove your commitment to them, with a ring for Shawnee or a positive fatherly interaction with Alvin for Triss. Then you're finally ready to fight Salamandra with either a satisfied sorceress or one that has decided to deal with you in a professional capacity only from now on. Instantly gone is the helping hand to guide Geralt through his amnesia, and we'll have to see how awkward this choice can make things in Witcher 2. Whether Triss is happy or angry isn't the only main plotline that becomes entangled at the conclusion of Chapter 3. You meet her with Luvarden and your chosen fighter at the new Naracourt Inn. Somehow Salamandra has gotten wind of your attack only after you progress this quest in a private conversation with Triss, and they're waiting to ambush you at the entrance. If you did not kill Vincent Mise, then he will also be there to help you, as a man or a werewolf, again depending on your choices earlier when it comes to helping Carmen. Either way, he considers himself a werewolf avenger that has come to your aid, and I love this line Geralt says here if you fight alongside him in this form.
And Vincent's a decent werewolf.
If you killed Vincent, then this battle is probably the second most difficult in the game, or at least I was getting unlucky with failed attacks and stuns when I did it. After getting upstairs, Duet appears and will try smashing down the door to stop Triss's teleport, which makes things awkward if Siegfried is the one helping you, since Duet is a superior commander in their order. He ignores this, proving once again to be a great Sieg friend, and you teleport away earlier than planned. Whether the Scoia'tael or the Order help you largely doesn't matter for the battle,
really
it ends up
nice
being a flavorful consequence.
It's really good against
You clear out some Salamandra goons, and if you try to fight without activating the teleport gate nearby for reinforcements, you will learn that Salamandra has an infinitely spawning fighting force that will trap you here forever. Reinforcements help you solve this problem, and after a large brawl, you confront the professor and Azerjaved, again, for the third or fourth time at this point.
Can't
This
really
is
go
where
wrong
the
with
only
lasagnas.
impactful consequence is found in the whole of Chapter 3 that is a result of a decision not from this chapter, whether you got duped by Azir Javed's performance as Raymond. This is a strange one because the fight at the tower goes the exact same way regardless of whether you figure out the mystery or
It's
not.
not a
Geralt is left there dying and the Saturday morning
seems
cartoon
better.
villains get away no matter what, but the decision recap here retcons this and makes the got duped defeat far more serious, even though both paths are identical. Apparently, if you get tricked, then Azir Javed steals a book from you and or the tower, one that you got from a chest when you went in, or I don't really know how it
I
works
hit
to
a
be
read on
honest.
him.
If you're not tricked, Triss takes it instead when she saves you after detecting the magic Javed uses. She doesn't tell you that she took this book from you when you were unconscious, and so it's a surprise she's able to cast a very powerful shielding spell on you that she's learned from it. This is set up as a moderate mystery that is never brought up again. The immediate effect is that Azir Javed is helpless against Triss's shield spell in this encounter at the end of Chapter 3. Despite also being a capable swordsman, he freaks out and runs away, leaving you to fight the professor with the strong shield buff arcing out attacks from you against all enemies in the area. If you were tricked at the end of Chapter 2, then Javed has this spell because he took the book even though that didn't happen at all. You're not immune to his attacks, so you get wrecked, but in true shitty cartoon villain fashion, they don't kill you when they have the chance for what is the second, third, or even fourth time now. Instead, you're allowed to recover, and then he leaves you to fight the professor who has the shielding spell instead of you, making the
Yeah,
fight
well,
slightly
but-
more difficult.
no,
Neither Triss nor Javed ever cast this spell ever again after this. I've been hard on these villains throughout this video, and I will continue to do so while being condescendingly righteous about it because Azir Javed isn't even the real antagonist of the game. However, I do want to praise the only good thing that comes from them because it was set up in the prologue and finally pays off here. The professor kills Leo with a jeer about how the legend of witchers being able to parry bolts in flight turning out to be just another fairy tale. Leo is still in training and hasn't been mutated like the other witchers, so he fails to do this, dying. Geralt performs the feat in this scene, and the professor, about to be killed, is still impressed. I appreciate when things like this are set up and then called back in a way that isn't obvious. When you can't know for sure that, oh yeah, this will come back up later. This also gets bonus points for being a book reference. They also lovingly call attention to it in the first episode of the Netflix show. The professor is not the real boss fight here. When you defeat him, he causes an explosion that makes you both fall deeper into the Kikimor caves. You're both quite deep underneath Vizima at this point. After the dust clears, there's a Kikimor queen that eats the professor, except that she doesn't eat him, she just mimes it and tosses his body aside. You can even see it, but later on you gut the queen's corpse to get at the professor's body, and I am very sorry that I am sick enough that this bothers me, but it's shank that I can't ignore. I've been trying my best not to comment on bugs and the overall poor state of this game's polish so far, but it's impossible to ignore here. You cannot fight the Kikimor queen via conventional methods. You fight much larger and much more dangerous monsters later in the series, but apparently Amnesia Geralt doesn't have the moves yet. Get close and you die instantly. Instead, you have to run away through these caves and use Ard to collapse support struts to slow the queen down, and then eventually kill it in the same way. So let's end Chapter 3 with the extravaganza, which I want to stress shouldn't damn the game as being shit.
The hell out of me.
This was not a pristine AAA funded title like Witcher 3, which is certainly relatively bug-free compared to this, right?
Andros has declared war.
Hair flapping as it tries to escape, beards flapping as they try to escape, characters get looped in animations, characters getting locked into no animations, characters walking when they should be standing still, Geralt can't speak to innkeepers across the bar and has to walk all the way around, missing doors, invisible doors, whole cooked chickens found in barrels, stealing things right in front of people, they don't care, enemies teleporting next to you, NPCs teleporting next to you, NPCs teleporting out of the game until you restart. Characters teleporting out of frame as they speak.
I'm not surprised.
NPCs forgetting that you exist. Geralt is surprised when a character named Con Artist tricks him. Raymond says he has to go into hiding, he leaves the house, but then he immediately creeps back in and won't let you continue the quest until you reboot the house by leaving and entering again.
It's not every day I get an illustrious customer like you.
Lovely inn. You must host many an illustrious guest.
True.
Every load screen has a chance to make you get stuck in a lower run speed until you load again. A dice player demands high bets only, but he's one of the lowest in the game. Geralt can jump like an acrobat in cutscenes, but not when you're in control. NPCs drinking through their necks. Almost every elf is a receding hairline conehead monster. Subtitles don't match the voice lines. Voice actors changing between lines.
Sounds grandiose, doesn't it?
Rarely does anyone recall that the Order of the Flaming Rose was one.
They forgot to put the water under this bridge. This NPC's face becomes the monster from Amnesia: The Dark Descent. NPCs won't talk to you. Random invincibility while fighting, random lack of invincibility in cutscenes. Sometimes quests are inactive and can't currently be progressed but still show up as active in your journal. This happens.
Bastard! Take that!
And arting down the walls in this cave to kill the Kikimor Queen fails more times than it doesn't. The Kikimors can despawn and never come back, but the quest doesn't complete. You have to reload and try again. The ceiling doesn't fall no matter how many times you ard or where you aim. Then it does fall down and you die. Run down the tunnel like you're supposed to, you still die. Run so far down the tunnel you're twerking into the wall, you still die. I appreciate the attempt at a different type of boss encounter here, especially against a big monster, but this part is so poorly rigged that I dread it every time that I get here because I know I'm going to have to try multiple times before I get through it, like I'm glitching through the glitches. Witcher 2 is worse than this, by the way.
I knew we'd meet again.
Not you.
If successful, you get some incriminating papers from the body of the professor, who is totally not in the stomach of the Kikimor Queen, but who gives a shit. Then you climb out to be ambushed by Princess Ada and her entourage. She sentences Geralt to death to silence him since he's now learned the truth that she's working to overthrow her father with the wed. Geralt invokes the sacred custom of a final wish before his death, one of many of these types of romantic rules in this world, by asking her for a kiss. Regardless of whether they slept together in the party earlier, Ada reacts in the same way and accepts. And again, whether Triss is currently angry with you or not about Shawnee, we cut to her magically spying, giving a sly remark, and then teleporting Geralt to safety. We cut away and enter the next chapter, which is, I believe, a fan favorite.
He has been spirited away. Someone will pay for this.
Chapter 4, Where to Start. It's almost entirely quarantined from the rest of the game. You could replace it with text on a black screen that says, Geralt laid low for a month, and then only show the last hour of the chapter and not much would change. It's that disconnected from the rest of the story. Yet it's probably my favorite section of the game. I always look forward to getting to this part. Triss has sent you south from Vizima across the water. You are in Lakeside at the village of Murky Waters. I think it's obvious by now that I think the atmosphere is the real star of the Witcher series. I enjoy most of the characters, Geralt himself, and much of the writing, but it's the setting and characters of the world that I appreciate the most. So far, in just this game, that world has been a terrible, gritty nightmare.
My last cow died.
Geralt can't even have a few weeks of peace to recover from being brought back from the dead. This is the kind of place that throws him into fighting for his life and then dealing with horrible places with horrible people doing horrible things, usually to each other.
Really good.
I've seen people criticize this series for its portrayal of women, and I strongly disagree with that assessment. Yes, women are treated unfairly as an underclass to men in this society, but this isn't done as some sort of idealized fantasy. It's part of this ugly world where most men are portrayed as disgusting brutes that fight and drink and rape, shit and piss in the streets, seem to have an endless amount of phlegm to hawk up at Geralt, and wife beating is such an accepted norm that it's brought up casually in conversation. Racism and sexism isn't something we're close to solving today in our own world, and so it's little wonder that it runs rampant in a recreation of medieval society. That's not to say that all women in this setting are abused angels that would do so much better if they were in power, or that all men are tyrants that only care about drinking and whoring. Most characters fall on the spectrum between bad and good within the relative morality of this setting. It's not fair to hold them to our real-life modern standards, just like you better pray that future generations are just as courteous to you when they look back at our era through the lens of their future enlightened policies. But that doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't still find much of what goes on in these games repulsive. We spoke earlier about Shrekification, even though that's an unfair term since the Witcher books predate Shrek. This gritty brutality is the biggest difference between them. It's a fantasy smorgasbord of some of our most charming and romantic fairy tales, but with the most violent, bigoted tendencies of our species thrown right in with it all. It's not quite the extreme of the best we can imagine stirred in with the worst of our reality, but it's pretty close. Lakeside in Chapter 4 is where we finally get to see a place in the Witcher world where the good side reigns as ruler, but I need to be careful with how I say this because good doesn't mean everything here is peachy. It means that the fairy tale and folklore side is the dominating force. The further genius of this chapter that you can start to piece together immediately with the shimmering image of this fantastical city over the lake in its introductory cinematic is that it's a reflection of everything we've seen so far on top of this Shrekified land. It's a mirror image that's an improvement of every chapter we've seen so far, just like an enchanted mirror in which everything looks prettier than it actually is. If you've played Witcher 3 and its expansion Blood and Wine, then the best way to understand Lakeside is to think of it as a pocket of Toussaint. The Lady of the Lake is even another commonality between them, although she has much more of a presence in Lakeside. The goddess Lady of the Lake is also probably a post-conjunction refugee that has been stranded in this world for 1500 years. The unanswered question that her residency in both of these locations prompts is whether she is what makes these regions have their overbearing fairy tale flourish, or if the lady is attracted to places that naturally become like this. Toussaint is a much more prosperous place than Murky Waters, although with that greatly expanded success comes an equally powerful shadow. And I wonder if given enough time, the lady's influence could expand from Lakeside in the same way. Or maybe the lake itself is where most of her positive effects are saturated. The outskirts are a barnacle on the wall of a corrupt city. Plague and evil have infested here and have manifested into a monster like a festival of reckoning. Murky Waters is balanced within beautiful nature, and their biggest current event is celebrating a wedding. The people of Vizima are in a steaming pile of pollution and even more plague. Its victims piled in the middle of the city and are doing their best to steal any advantage they can from each other. The people of Murky Waters seem to be unaware that there's even a plague to fear, and its people ask you to solve a problem they have with pygmies destroying their bridge by getting them a harness so they can ride around on a cat like a horse. One woman asks you to convince the local baker to make her a sugar doll, which is apparently a scandal. The blacksmith has a monster problem, but it's that he's having fun with a succubus, not fearing for his life. Much to the dismay of his wife, who doesn't want to kill him for this, she just wants the succubus to be driven away so she can have her husband back. She kinda seems equally amused and annoyed by it, if anything. The Vodunoi that the brickmakers in the swamp have brainwashed themselves into viewing as Lovecraftian deities, the water lords that are even ruled over by a Dagon, are also here, but the citizens of Murky Waters are much closer to considering them as equals. There's no worship, no brainwashing. If they do worship anything, it's their prized cow named Strawberry, which they pamper and protect during the day. Here there is no conflict between the Order and the Scoia'tael. There is a band of elves nearby, but the villagers offered them aid, not hate, which the elves took to be too pity-soaked a handout to take, and so they hide, rejected by their own pride, in a cave. There's something about the beautiful naivete of this place that makes my soul ache. The outskirts is repugnant, and I want to see it bleed and be redeemed. Murky Waters hurts like seeing a baby that you know isn't going to make it through their life without something deeply damaging them. I just want to bundle this place up and keep it safe, which of course is impossible. It's this game. An unwarranted slaughter arrives at the end. If you thought any different, then you haven't been paying attention. Geralt's role is also inverted in this chapter. You're not here to kill monsters, you're here to kill time. There is a continuation from the previous stories. Alvin teleported himself here at the end of chapter 3, which is why Triss sent you here and not anywhere else. Same for Dandelion, who was teleported to aid you, but your goals in chapter 4 are much more languorous. No Salamandra, no big monster, at least at first. Just roam around and take it all in. That's not to say that this is a perfect place and there aren't more serious monsters around here. There are Noonwraiths that stalk the fields by day and Devourers that roam around at night. The local crypts have the usual undead suspects, and there are the drowned dead that seem to crawl out of any body of water in this world. There are jobs for a Witcher, but more than any place in this game, Murky Waters appears to be living in harmony by working within the limitations these monsters create. Let's talk about these areas some more. Chapter 4 is probably the largest of the 5 in terms of new zones that are introduced. There are 3 interconnected areas, an island that you get to by boat, 2 crypts, and some other small interior locations. The fields in particular are quite large, and while I dislike how it can be difficult to see through the tall wheat, it's really nice that the big open area isn't a swamp again. It's another reason why chapter 4 is my favorite. It's so refreshing to be out in the open after 2 chapters in a row in the city. If we stitch these maps together, we can see that Lakeside has the same circuit-style structure as the outskirts, yet it doesn't become nearly as tedious to walk through because it's much more cleverly arranged. Take, for example, that despite being at least 3 times larger than the outskirts, it takes less than 4 minutes to walk a full circuit, whereas in chapter 1 it took 5. The reason why this works is that the path running through these 3 central locations is kept tight with the important landmarks branching off of it instead of being placed along a road that would need to be much longer to accommodate it all. It's a good thing that they didn't repeat the problems of the outskirts because there is quite a bit of running around to do in this chapter. As usual, the inn is your base of operations, and it is more centrally located than ever. Some quests are optional, but the most effective way to push progress is to simply do everything available to you. You are here to kill time after all. That said, the specific must-do tasks are: meet the Lady of the Lake, broker an agreement between the people of Murky Waters and the Vodunoi in the Underwater City, speak to Berengar, a fellow Witcher, to find out what he knows about Salamandra, look after Alvin, and solve the issue of the dead ghost bride when the planned wedding goes awry. Keeping true with the state of the quests in the game so far, all of these threads are tangled together. The Lady of the Lake wishes to keep the peace between the humans and the Vodunoi. Berengar was contracted to solve this problem before you arrive and take it over. Alvin is currently being looked after by Alina, who is the bride-to-be in town that dies. And her fiancé is Julian, who is leading the group planning to plunder the Lake of Riches, which is why the conflict between the humans and the Vodunoi has occurred to begin with. It's all neatly tied together. Isn't it lovely? It's also weird. This huge statue feels so out of place. There's talking gas mask fish people, this mysterious little girl is left to seemingly live on the coast, and the monsters never bother her even at night. The Lady of the Lake is of course from Arthurian legend. She has her mute helper the Fisher King and a hermit that lives in the southern ends of the fields. You can learn about her prior party of devoted knights who were searching for the Holy Grail, and trying to do so yourself is the wrong answer. Doing so will make the lady displeased and grant you the title of Sir Bonehead, because what she really wanted from Geralt was to bone his head, a goddess with benefit situation. I'm not kidding, she's lonely.
I'll take that.
The King of the Wild Hunt is here and he's just chilling in a field. I can't focus attention to this yet because in the context of Witcher 1, you have no idea how baffling it is for this character to be here vibing like this, but since you've probably played Witcher 3, you likely understand why I'm so flabbergasted. Dealing with this inexplicable Wild Hunt invasion for the Hermit gives you the choice of 3 rewards, one of which can be used to resolve something in the main quest, but you might not know that when you have to choose, and there's no going back on it. The Wreath of Immortelles is the item you want. Meanwhile, the other 2 are useless, especially the Wild Hut. You can't even rest in it. The wreath is used to break the curse that is placed on Selena, Alina's sister. Yeah, they actually named them Alina and Selena. There's also Julian and Adam and way too many characters.
If we can wait like 3 more minutes,
I thought this was going to be a love diamond you needed to resolve. Adam loves Alina, but she maybe loves Julian, who Selena also possibly loves, while Julian seems to be here primarily to marry into a family that lives in the village so he can launch his lake plundering operation. That's being a little too harsh on Julian, but he's not exactly broken up about the deaths of these 2 sisters. To his credit, he does go along with the lady's plans for a peace treaty rather than killing the Vodunoi. He also appreciates the work of Witchers and has a good story about one that helped his family. So how did the sisters die? You don't see Alina's death yourself. Selena is so bitterly envious of her sister getting married that she's acting crazy. She'll throw herself at you if you gift her any old ring, or as she says, I'll give myself to you right now on the nearest rock.
I'll give myself to you right now on the nearest rock.
Which is ironic, seeing as she shoves her sister in a moment of rage headfirst onto a rock, which kills her. Again, this is weird. The way it all happens so fast, with Alina transforming into a zombie, sunburnt prune version of Catherine.
Wait, does the E die
then
when I
Adam
die?
kills Selena in revenge, and she turns into a pale moon wraith to Alina's midday bride.
Yes.
I really like the names of these monsters and how they look, but it feels like it comes out of nowhere because you're not directly involved with it. Instead, it's speaking to other characters like Alvin and progressing the so-called main quests of this chapter that cause these unrelated characters to move toward their doom. Here's where it gets complicated. Adam can also die and come back as a Scooby-Doo ghost. If you saved her in Chapter 1, then Abigail is in Murky Waters. She's collecting the villagers' secrets and brewing date rape potions to sell to them, and that's only the thing she'll admit to you. You can ask her to recall the romantic time you spent together in the cave at the end of Chapter 1, even if you turned her down and it didn't happen. You can also ask her for help resolving the issue with the midday bride.
That conceited wench? She came to possess a rare and powerful Nehelenia's mirror.
The first thing you try is to assemble a magical mirror that Alina had by collecting shards of it from other moon wraiths in the fields. She must have had this incredibly powerful magical artifact on her when she died, and only the wraiths collected the pieces. I know, weird. I think even the game says it's weird, so I guess they're lampshading it or something. After getting the local blacksmith to fix it, you get dead Alina to ponder her own reflection, but it doesn't break the curse as was planned. If you let Abigail die in Chapter 1, then you can get the same advice about the mirror from either the Lady of the Lake or a healer that lives in the same house, an old unnamed lady that just magically replaces Abigail and is nowhere to be found in the village if Abigail survived and is living here. In this progression path, the mirror still fails, except now, because Abigail died, it fails due to her innocent blood being on your hands that I spoke about earlier. I want to repeat that it still fails even if you save innocent Abigail, who again is so innocently scheming and conniving her way into a place of power and prominence in murky waters. The bigger difference is that if Abigail is killed, the old lady replacement healer suggests that only the dead can reach the dead, which unravels into Adam having to be freed of his imprisonment if you told Julian he's guilty for killing Selena, which ultimately leads to Adam killing himself in order to reach Alina, and then their spirits leave in peace. I'm getting confused reading Alina and Selena out right now, so I'm really sorry that the games chose those two similar names. If Abigail is alive, then you can ask Dandelion to compose a ballad, which you must help him rhyme on the spot, hilariously messing up as many times as you like for the song to reach her so she moves on. After this, you can use the Wreath of Immortelles to break the curse on Selena. If you chose wrong, then she's just stuck like this forever, I guess, or until the next Witcher comes along. You can't go back to the Hermit and tell him what happened and change your answer or trade the useless hut for the Wreath. That's all she wrote. The other main quests build on the events of the previous chapters. If you left Alvin with Shawnee, then he can be found at the side of the river with a new dog he's adopted. You rescue him from a devourer, and then Geralt has a moment of reflection where he realizes that a future was coming, but it comes at a cost when the princess is the opposite of grateful for being spared. This kind of feeling is present in much of the Witcher short stories. Like the world of Shrek, the Witcher's planet, or sphere as its people would call it, is an amalgamation of fairy tales, legends, and even different religions. It's a melting pot of our real-life cultures, both past and present, that in many cases have been brought to real life in this imaginary world. As if in response to that, just like Shrek is a warped protagonist to match the warped reality of his world, Geralt is just as mutated as those fairy tales and beliefs have become. The key difference is Shrek is played for laughs. The Witcher, while sometimes funny as well, takes this seriously. What would a human society have to turn into in order to survive in a world like this? What would a man capable of going head-to-head against our own worst imagined nightmares, now brought fiendishly to life, have to evolve into in order to stand a chance? And is it any wonder that common people would be terrified of the man that is the monster to the monsters? The lone fairy tale reference I found in the outskirts was Vesna. She's a waitress at the inn, and after speaking to her there, you have the chance to escort her home at night if you happen to notice her. She's trying to get to her grandmother's house. She's attacked by men at first, but then the problem becomes the wolf-like bar guests, and her last name is Hood. You can also have sex with her in a haunted mill after this if you bring her some wine. The sound of you both going at it reinforces the idea that the mill is haunted to some people across the river. This Red Riding Hood reference doesn't really have a point to it like I feel the ones in Sapkowski's books do, where the original tale being twisted calls into question the meaning and intentions of the original. In the Beauty and the Beast story, the would-be beast claims he's happy in his cursed state, that many women surprisingly enjoy the novelty of it. Book Geralt, who tries to only kill mindless monsters, decides to move on without attacking this beast, and while that isn't the ending of that story, it's one of many that feeds into the theme that you can't judge from appearances alone. Just because something is expected to be a monster doesn't mean it has to be one, even if it looks like one or is suffering from a curse that is meant to turn it into one. The conclusion of Chapter 1 proves that CD Projekt is willing to embrace this idea, but it also includes another fundamental part of The Witcher, and especially Geralt himself, choosing the lesser evil.
Can I get him here?
Can be hard at times. Happen to know a thing or two about that.
One of The Witcher 3 cinematics uses a shortened version of Geralt's speech about choosing evil from the books, but the meaning is mostly the same. What didn't sit right with me at first is that Geralt is choosing to do evil as his voiceover is saying he doesn't want to do that. Upon first watching, it may be easy to dismiss these Nilfgaardian executioners as evil for tormenting this woman accused of multiple crimes. We know the guards are guilty of overly cruel punishment right before Geralt turns around and dishes out his own cruel punishment and leaves one guard to suffer presumably even more. Just like we don't know if the woman is guilty of what sounds like some truly wicked deeds, another person coming along at this moment wouldn't know if the guards deserve what Geralt is doing to them either. Geralt is, at least a little, choosing evil in this scene, and I hope that hypocrisy is intentional because it's true to book Geralt's character, which in this cinematic Geralt now is because this takes place after he's regained his memories. This Witcher is constantly finding himself in the middle of a problem and having to act when he's eventually convinced that even inaction becomes another form of evil, and a greater one than choosing what he believes is the better of two bad choices. The issue I have with this being the intended meaning of this cinematic, even though I can just ignore that and go along with my own interpretation, is that CD Projekt has a lot of trouble keeping the continuity straight between their own games, never mind with the books. So even though it may seem obvious that this is the deliberate message of this cinematic, I can't be sure. In Witcher 1's case, they contradict this very point within just a few chapters, whether Abigail the Witch is guilty of committing evil or not.
Each of us has a purpose. We are destined to do something meaningful. Not only to support our loved ones, but to positively impact our communities throughout the country. What do you think a private Christian education looks like? Grand Canyon University graduates 25,000 students yearly and offers more than 225 high-quality programs across 9 colleges. Find your purpose at GCU. Visit gcu.edu.
She lifted me because I couldn't go to anybody else. I was very scared. I was afraid of what was going to be said about me, how people was going to look at me. My granny, my backbone, she made me feel at ease. She made me feel like you have a reason to live. Don't worry about what people may say or what people may think of you. You're here for a purpose. You know, this is
Wait,
my
did
life.
my Q not come out? Are you serious?
I was
That would have
there
killed.
to listen and to let him know that he did not have to go.
The true reason why the beast has come to the outskirts is never confirmed. You are instead given two options and you must choose which you think is more likely. The people of the outskirts have committed many crimes, most of which happened before you arrived. The Reverend has recently led a revolution among the people in which they cleanse themselves and their families of all sin. This information is presented to you in a side conversation with the innkeeper, and the way he only alludes to what happened with families being culled of sin makes me very uncomfortable. It makes me imagine quite a bloody cleansing which, as the Reverend claims, will appease the religious force known as the Eternal Fire for it to protect the outskirts from the plague. Presumably many innocents were killed in this cleansing. It's important to point out that it appears the Reverend is no con artist. One of the first tasks he gives you is to light the altars of the Eternal Fire in one night to drive away the beast. It's a good idea to do this while also escorting Vesna Hood home. The Reverend believes this will work. It doesn't, but it's important to know that he believes it. Even though he is revealed to be a horrible man, his faith in the Eternal Fire isn't a deception. Unless this task is only given by him to make Geralt believe that he's honest, but I think that's reading too much into it. Although characters do lie all the time in this game, so it's not that unreasonable. Isn't talking about The Witcher fun? The more recent crimes involve the death of Odo's brother, the rape and then suicide of a woman named Ilsa, and the illegal trading of goods to both the Scoia'tael and Salamandra, including, as you discover at the very end of the chapter, the funneling of unwanted children so they can be used in Salamandra's Witcher mutation experiment. It seems that all of these crimes have caused the beast to appear as karmic punishment. Alternatively, it could have nothing to do with the forces of the universe seeking justice, and instead the witch Abigail may have summoned the beast to terrorize the outskirts as an act of revenge. Even if you do decide that she's responsible, you may think that she was justified in doing so. I think that would be a hard thing to defend, seeing as in the opening scene you can see the beast attacking even newcomers to the village and a child, but hey, maybe you can understand where she's coming from at least. The last stretch of Chapter 1 begins when Abigail induces another prophetic episode in Alvin via a potion. The sins of the village are revealed through this rant, and Geralt reports to the Reverend that they can be rid of the beast if the guilty among them repent for their crimes. In exchange, the Reverend reveals that Salamandra has attacked the inn and that the innkeeper has a key to a nearby house where Geralt can find more of Salamandra's goons. When you get to the inn, the keeper is already dead and Shani is under attack. This is something every game in this series does that annoys me. Sometimes changes happen for no real reason. Geralt has not caused Salamandra to attack the inn, it's just happened because the developers needed it to in order to move the story along. This is different than the attack on the bridge earlier because that can be understood as an ambush that has been planned out and is happening now that Geralt is at the right place. It's also different to the conclusion of the Flotsam section in Witcher 2, when Flotsam streets will change after a certain stage in a quest directly because of a decision that the player makes at that stage.
What is Rengar doing?
Events like this, however, where the inn has just changed now because of an entirely unrelated conversation with the Reverend who somehow magically knows about it, are frustrating.
There we go.
Witcher 3 in particular is full of moments like these in quests. After saving Shawnee, you take a key from the innkeeper and use it to enter a house near a cave system in the southern part of the village. There you get to interrogate an officer in Salamandra before slaughtering them all and freeing a bunch of children that the outskirts offered in tribute or trade. Surprisingly, Alvin is among them, and in the next section of the cave, you also find Abigail hiding from the angry mob that the Reverend has spurred into action. Apparently, he's taken Geralt's advice of repent for your crimes to mean that Abigail is the source of all of it and needs to be killed. The pacing here suffers a bit. As I said earlier, Chapter 1 in this game is probably where you will do the most backtracking in what turns out to be by far the smallest chapter in terms of play area. After all of that repeated running around, so much happens so quickly that you can be left wondering when it all occurred. Alvin was kidnapped, the Reverend has mobilized the entire village, and Abigail has coincidentally taken refuge in the same cave that Salamandra was using as a hideout, with only a weak wall separating them. To make it worse, you can once again accidentally have sex here since Abigail offers herself to you in exchange for your support in the upcoming conflict with the Reverend's pitchfork party. She presents this offer as, "My sins are not as great as they say. Learn for yourself if you like. We're alone. We have some time," which apparently means sex. Maybe I'm being a big dumb doo-doo headman for not reading this as Abigail being a pickup artist, but my view on romancing Triss, Shawnee, and Abigail is that if I'm to choose between one redhead and another, then I prefer not to choose at all. The next scene brings the whole chapter together. My first time through, I was firmly in the camp of Abigail. The type of religious exploitation that the Reverend does is abhorrent to me, and it felt like Abigail was the classic witch scapegoat to blame for all of the outskirts problems. But there were a few details that were brought up that stuck in my mind and gnawed away at me throughout the rest of my playthrough. Then, when Abigail showed up again in Chapter 4, having seemingly not learned any lessons from Chapter 1, I decided to take a closer look at all of this in my next playthrough. Abigail is guilty of something, but it's not clear what.
Me and
I
Rengar
don't get to
really
ask enough questions to solve this mystery, and sometimes I find that aggravating. Other times I accept that Geralt is speaking to a literal mob, and the time for polite investigation has long passed. It's not just that Abigail might be responsible for summoning the beast, she may also be responsible for many of the crimes committed by the people in the outskirts that the beast has apparently come to punish. There are details in the quests before this that you may not have given much attention to. If you're like me, that will be because of the game's weak opening. Here, as Geralt confronts the Reverend, you're basically slapped into realizing that this game is worth paying attention to. Ilsa isn't just a random corpse in the crypt. She killed herself with a vial of poison bought from Abigail after being raped by Mikkel. The monster plants in Odo's garden aren't just a random outbreak to give you a monster to kill. They've grown there because Odo murdered his own brother, a warrior whose armor you can inspect in Odo's house. And the strange, unavoidable interruptions by the dog when you're around here are because the animal is in mourning. In Abigail's house, you can find a doll that is quite hilariously just a shrunken version of Odo's character model, which she presumably used for her spells to have Odo kill his brother. It appears that Odo has been keeping himself constantly drunk since this murder too. Abigail also went out of her way to adopt Alvin, even though there have been plenty of other orphans in the outskirts long before he showed up, and it just so happens that he's a powerful source of magic.
For now,
I use my W to nuke them.
Abigail is kind, but she is awful.
Oh, my stomach hurts.
The boys' trance state roaring revelations are also directly caused by whatever concoction Abigail herself decided on using, and who knows what she might have been telling the boy when they're alone all this time. Privacy she insists on having while she prepares the potion without any help from Geralt. Not to mention how irresponsible it is to force that heavy of a psychedelic episode on a child with uncontrollable powers. After feigning some ignorance, she also already knows quite a bit about the beast under its other name, Alzir's Demon, and one of the Witcher contracts you get here is a request from her for 10 skulls from dead Barghests, to study them. Look, none of this is conclusive. In a different light, some of it could even be used as evidence that she's a good person that's trying to help. I'm guessing that's the point. You're not meant to be sure, But after passing judgment, there are some bigger clues. If you let Abigail live, you can speak to her again and tell her that choosing her was the lesser evil. She also abandons Alvin immediately. When you meet her again in Chapter 4, she is already learning the dark secrets
I didn't know that was a
of people in
strat.
her new home,
That's a cool
is willing
strat,
to
though.
use them for trade, and is brewing love potions. Not exactly exemplary behavior considering it's the ultimate date rape drug. Additionally, and I do have to preface this by saying this is the weakest point I have against her, her romance card is disturbing. It's very out of character and screams, "Hey, I'm evil." This goes against the message of many stories in the games and books though, since appearances aren't meant to be the best sign of a monster. But I mean, she's smearing blood over herself while she squats next to her sex toy skull to entice Geralt. This wouldn't be the only mismatched romance card in the game, but I still think this is weird. If you choose to side with the villagers, then Geralt demands that there be a fair trial, which of course never happens. The villagers kill her immediately, and after the final battle with the beast, you can then choose to punish the Reverend and his team for not giving Abigail that trial. However, the most interesting thing that happens here is Abigail's curse. She invokes dark power and damns Geralt in the name of something called the lion-headed spider, which is quite the image. There's very little information about this cult, but any worship in the name of this deity is banned in most countries. The glossary entry in this game states that bloody sacrifices are expected by practitioners of this faith and that any captured cultists are tried as murderers. For Abigail to say this and suddenly be a believer of this faith, after all of her calm and careful maneuvering throughout the chapter, feels to me like she finally dropped the facade for a final attempt at revenge before she's put to death.
Doubtless the villagers think so, believing me a monster.
Are you one, Abigail?
We all hide a monster inside us.
I'm still not sure if she's entirely responsible for the beast. Many people in the outskirts are guilty too. I have no doubts about that.
I think I just want to stack
It could be that Salamandra is forcing them to cooperate, but even then, stealing children for them has nothing to do with Abigail, and that's worthy of condemnation all on its own. But there are many places full of horrible people like this in the Witcher's world. You can even visit some that have worse criminals than this, and yet the outskirts is special in having a beast, and in having a witch that knew enough about it to perhaps summon one. The answer that feels right to me is that both sides deserve punishment, although leaving Abigail to this mob has never been something I've been comfortable doing. This is why I love Chapter 1 so much. It gave me so many details to think about and a conclusion that I'm still questioning. It also looped my preconceptions. You're meant to suspect Abigail a little at first, and then it becomes obvious that the villagers are the real monsters here. What could be more fitting in a game with a protagonist as unusual as Geralt for the witch to be undeservedly hated and worthy of being saved? But then it loops back to the witch not being innocent after all, but neither are all of the villagers. Just like on Twitter, everyone is awful here. Even remaining inactive is an immoral choice, and I feel more than ever that I agree with Geralt's speech. I'd rather let the two evils take care of each other. I'd rather not choose at all, but you have to. There's one wrinkle here though, and it's a big one. The game ruins all of this in Chapter 4 by directly telling you that Abigail is innocent. One of the solutions to a problem in Chapter 4 is suggested to you by a literal goddess, the Lady of the Lake. When her solution doesn't work, she explains it's because Geralt has the blood of an innocent on his hands, and it's directly stated that it's Abigail's.
Whose blood?
The blood of Abigail, a witch from the outskirts.
So all of these hints about Abigail's guilt are apparently red herrings, and her selling love potions and poison to people that she knows are going to use it for misdeeds is morally just fine. This doll of Odo must just be for fun. Maybe she uses it with the sex toy skull. But even this wrinkle has a wrinkle. 3 actually. The first is that if Abigail survives Chapter 1, this solution offered by the goddess still doesn't work. It doesn't matter whether Geralt has innocent blood on his hands or not. It's not brought up as a reason for the failure unless Abigail is dead.
Oh wait,
the second is that this innocent blood problem might not be about innocence at all, and is instead how Abigail's curse is presenting itself to foil your attempt at doing something later in the game, in the same place she would have gone on to inhabit if she hadn't died. The third wrinkle is a much bigger problem in the series. Sometimes making a choice changes more than just what's related to that choice. That was kind of wordy. Here's an example to better explain. Let's say you wake up one morning and you have a glass of orange juice. You then look out the window and it starts to rain. Now we rewind the morning and instead of orange juice, you decide to have milk. You then look out the window and it's a bright sunny day. Your choice has nothing to do with the weather, but it still made it change. This is how some choices work in this series. I know it sounds dumb, but It's true. Geralt is slipped into another dimension where different things happen now because of a choice that had nothing to do with them. Is that what happened here? I'm not sure. To me, Abigail is absolutely guilty of many things, but maybe not enough to warrant death, and that's why the goddess used it as a stain on Geralt. But then Geralt isn't the one that kills her, so should he truly be responsible? He wanted her to have a fair trial, and it's the villagers that decided to ignore that and go for blood. Geralt was the one cursed though, and away we go again. Like I said, there's a lot to think about here. Isn't talking about The Witcher fun? The fight against the beast is noteworthy in that it's one of the toughest battles in the game, and it's this early on. The only fight I found more difficult than this on hard mode was trying to kill the Striga in chapter 5 instead of lifting the curse on it. Randomness is a big part of the fight against the beast since it can inflict pain, which is a status effect that stuns Geralt, but it's different than a stun according to the game because of the spelling. A single swallow regeneration potion is usually enough to get through this fight, although it's not always required if you get lucky with avoiding pain. Curiously, according to the notes you recover on the beast, there's meant to be a question that it asks you before you fight it. If you answer correctly, then the beast is weakened and can be more easily defeated. This beast asks no question, but the fight does come directly after the choice you make between Abigail and the villagers. The boss fight is much easier if you side with the villagers, but gameplay is so unpolished and janky in this game that it's impossible to know if that's intended. Abigail's magic should, in theory, be much more useful, but she usually gets knocked out seconds into the fight. It would have been cool if this decision between Abigail and the villagers was the beast's question all along, but we'll never know. We do find out about the ultimate fate of the outskirts in Witcher 3 though. It's burned to the ground by an invading army, swept away.
I don't really want to be near
After all of this, you get a pass to enter the city. You meet up with Shawnee and you both head to the city gate together. Mikkel is there and, depending on your choices, he may be the only survivor of the main outskirts characters that you interacted with in this chapter. It's here that he betrays you, and after Shawnee conveniently vanishes into thin air after you get here, you're arrested and thrown into the city jail as your warm welcome back to Vizima. So after spending days being trapped outside the city, Geralt finally gets past the quarantine blockade, only to be imprisoned and now stuck inside the city. The Witcher series is not without a generous application of irony, especially in Witcher 2. This opening scene is one of the more memorable ones from this game, with the thief bemoaning that he's been lumped in with the politicals because there's a witcher and an elf in this large cell. This is one of many speeches and phrases that are ripped right from the books. I believe this dialogue is from The Last Wish, the story where Geralt first meets Yennefer, the second most important person in Geralt's life, and one whose name is never spoken in this game, not even once. Except for an adventure module. The other memorable part of this scene is the shot when the camera slides between these bars. The professor has also been imprisoned here, but he's being released just after Geralt has been brought in. Again, I feel compelled to point out that the character models are pretty bad, but I still think this shot is cool, and it shows how even back then, CD Projekt still cared deeply about the presentation of their games. It's not just the standard, we want our games to look as good as possible.
Abso-fucking-lutely beautiful.
It's a desire to push presentation forward and have it be a focus. The fully realized city streets of Vizima that we'll be seeing soon also support this commitment. But as Leonardo DiCaprio is fond of saying, let's get back to the models. Witcher 1 doesn't have much variety in its NPCs. It uses the same models for dozens of characters, and the reason we're bringing this up now is because this jail cell has 9 people in it, and 6 of them are the same person. Same model, same voice. I'm going to catch a lot of shit for saying this, but I kind of like this about the game. It adds to that cohesive weirdness of the presentation. In this example, it's like a Super Nintendo RPG, the same model pasted to fill up space.
Wait, what? They surrendered off that?
Whereas on a case-by-case basis, with the same model coming back individually in different sections of the game, it makes it feel like a stage play performance where the same actor is rushing backstage to change into a different colored outfit for the next time he goes on stage as a different character. This definitely only works because of the strained low-budget charm CD Projekt was working with, and I don't think I'd accept it in a full AAA game, which means it's a good thing there's no way Witcher 3 has the same problem, right?
Hey, 16k, let's go.
My favorite of these NPC archetypes is the fat Jason Statham. He's usually paired with this voice that sounds like his lungs have been tied together in a bow. Yo-ho! Whitey! We fight for money! That takes away a large part of the hunting preparation phase and the Witcher fantasy, and we can see that here with the cockatrice. This is communicated to you as being a much bigger deal than
we got an Ezreal,
drowner,
so
and you just run at it and hit it with your
roughly.
sword a bunch of times. Then it dies, just like a drowner. Turns out it can be a buddy monster hunt after all though, since this is where you meet Siegfried, who is one of the nicest characters in the game and wants more than anything else to be your Sieg friend. Siegfried is a knight in the Order of the Flaming Rose. They're a monastic military mass mouthful that acts as the forceful arm of the Eternal Fire's interests. They're meant to keep the peace and help the less fortunate, which some of them, like Siegfried, actually do, but there's also that pesky tendency that many orders like this have with setting heretics on fire as an example to others. Siegfried and knights like him hunt monsters for free, which is something Geralt finds offensive. Of course, it's not really for free, since the Order is funded through political pressure as they gain power, but that's what Siegfried says, and maybe believes. I'm quite fond of Siegfried, and I think the game handles him well. It's also interesting to note that if this game was made by anyone else, Siegfried would have been the player character. A noble knight that seeks to fight evil, defending the downtrodden, who eventually uncovers the corruption in the Order he swore an oath to, and then redeems them from within. Instead, you're mutant Geralt. I like that better. The cockatrice poses no real threat whether you team up with Siegfried or not. Regardless, you still go to the exit of the sewers together and are attacked by Salamandra. Siegfried defends you and then poses the question, how did Salamandra know that Geralt was in the sewers? Then you leave and you're finally free to wander the streets of Vizima. The game opens up substantially and you'll probably feel a great relief to finally be somewhere new after so much time in the outskirts.
Your maximum refund for just $25? Now that's what we call a win. No hidden fees, no gimmicks, no surprises. File your taxes for one amazing
Oh, she's already a Dark Harvest person.
1040.com.
One pull. Fortunately, I'm lagging a bit, but I think I'll be okay. I'm support, it's not like I'm mid. Maybe I could try turning that off for a sec. Yeah, it looks a little bit better. Oh, if that hit. W off it. Okay, I'll take that. I could have passived him, but it's whatever. Being too greedy, I gotta hold it. You see that? That's a nice way of baiting an enemy. Got a nice harvest stack. And a W stack. Sometimes the silence is not too bad. She's got her shield now. Oh wait, no she doesn't. She'll have her shield though. That's okay, you don't need to hit your moves. I can hit my moves. We got Lee Song coming in. Oh wait, no he's not. This Morgana wants me. Both our mana should be pretty low right now. Yeah, I'll take that harvest stack any time of the day. If I had Ignite, I maybe could Ignite Flash Auto. And max W again, because it does a lot of damage. Even if the cooldown's long early. Maxing it, I think, makes that cooldown less long as well. This thing's helping out a lot. probably hold on to W until Dark Harvest is back online. I'm full health. Spooking out. See, that prompt exhaust can help out, but his slow's really strong. Stronger anyways. Let's go grab ourselves some boots and some... I think we need damage, not health. We're not really taking damage. That's worth. My guy is winning in CS compared to Ezreal. I should have bought Red Ward. I have a lot of harvest stacks for no kills. I'm gonna face check this, because I want to feel alive. Oh, your attack does not do that much yet, buddy. As much as I wish it did. Okay, now he's screwing up. Look at that damage. Very nice. Very respectable damage right there. Whew. Yep. I think I might go realize this game. Oh, I wanted to face tank it. Nothing gives me more satisfaction than seeing another deprived of cannon minion. There's so much passive pressure. W also gives very nice pressure. But it does costly in terms of minion cost. That's that synergy. This seems greedy. That was an interesting ultimate. That's all I'm gonna say about that. Is that actually enough pressure to make the Ezreal back? Or is he just breaking us? I want W for the stack, but it wouldn't really be worth it now, would it? Get a flash queued. I don't think this guy's too used to playing as Jhin. I'm just poking him for the thingy. I'm so concerned. Maybe I can W someone here. Nice. The harvest stack. Oh, and assist also, apparently. That guy's coming. don't know if she W'd or not, it's just banter. Who's our jungler? Oh, Lee Sin. Yeah, he's playing from pretty far back. I want to back. I don't think she's gonna let me though. I'm gonna back here. She missed. I hit 2 of them with it. Nice. Not even in lane yet. Look how much damage I did to that caster minion. That's the power. Gift for playing swain. I think I might have gotten 2 stacks off that actually, because I did WS when he was kind of low. I don't know if that counted for a stack though. Actually, I wonder if you could go like Karthus and ult for hardest stacks. I don't know if you can do them on 2 different champions. You're in 19, lol. Irie, do you want to switch lanes? I didn't want to push that any deeper than it was. Oh, look at that. Just beautiful root right there. Okay, I'm dead. Especially with that pathing, what the heck? I should have autoed him for a heart attack. What they say, nostalgia is 2020 vision. Look at that. Free AP just for picking Swain. Being a cool dude. You know what? I kinda wanna try. Oh, it reduces summoner spell cooldown? I didn't know that. I think I'm gonna save up for this. Spiritual shoes or whatever they're called. That was not the greatest time to ult, but I admire the hustle. Alright, where's this guy gonna back? Right next to his tower, I bet? I wonder if I can one-shot him actually, if he keeps tanking turrets like that. That's one way of doing it. I didn't have enough damage to do anything there. Oh, it's so hot in here. Why did it get so hot all of a sudden? I'm about to go screw with the thermostat for a sec. My cheeks are burning. Gotta hold the lane for Jin though. It's a thankless job. There's a lot of mobility. That wouldn't have been enough for harvest anyways. I would have had to pull him. 2 people want to surrender for some reason. Someone pulled it all the way up to 70. Holy hell. I'm gonna burn to death. Why can I not buy this? Oh, I forgot to back. Do some stuff maybe. I queued it a lot. I need my power spike though. Not the greatest timing. Yeah, it's 15 to 12 when they want to surrender. Quick guys, we're down by like practically nothing. I hit someone with it, that's worth it. That was quite the queue. I think he might have queued his mini-map by accident. Nice. Let me get a stack. Never mind. That'll work. Is anyone going top? Oh, we got Ari on it. Ari is on the job. Ariana. Grande. I didn't even need to use ult for that. Okay. That is definitely one way of doing it. Why are you so scared? Look how much healing I got. I hit 3 people and I healed for so much. Oh, look at that damage. Beautiful. Not quite. I hit 2 of them. Whenever they see someone backing like that, they're like, nah, they're gonna cancel it. There's no way they just keep backing like a legend. And then I just keep backing like a legend, because I am. You know, where it's slid by. I forgot to get red thingy. I make them dance around my W's. Landed. There we go. Oh, I don't have my exhaust up yet. I did get that double though. Look at those Dark Harvest stacks, up to 13 now. Oh yeah, baby. Maybe a little bit of mistakes were made, but not that many. Nice. I guess he thought I wouldn't have my ult left. Another surrender? We're not even winning that hard. Alright, I guess that's how the game goes. That was 3 surrenders in a row for me, although one of them was a remake. I count it. I can count it if I want. Let me honor this Jin for hitting all those W's. Wow, that Lucian was actually doing a lot better than I thought he was. Got 2 honors that game. I didn't realize that I was support until after I picked Swain, but it doesn't matter because Swain can support. Alright, I'll see you guys on the next one.